Welcome to the Tunepact podcast. I'm your host, the punk rock pop, Lee Pierce. And today we're finishing up our talk with founder and CEO of Punkerton Records, Brandon Allen Lewis. Today we're going to be talking more about record label basics. We're going to be talking about how to approach a label when it is time, when you feel like it's time. So, Brandon, why don't you do another quick introduction for anybody that may have missed the first part of this?
First, thanks for having me on. I'm Brandon Allen Lewis, founder of Punkerton Records. Started the label back at the tail end of 2020, and just trying to get amazing music out into the world.
And you are. I'll be the first to say that. So thank you for that. So today we're talking more about what artists now artists have decided to approach a label. They feel like that's the next step and they're ready to do it. So how do they go about doing that is the big question. Do you feel it's important for artists to really research and find a genre specific label that fits more their vibe, or to shop around and look for more of a general record label?
I think really it depends on your genre. Punkerton Records, we are actually a pretty general label. I know it says punk in the thing, but we will literally do anything punk adjacent, a bunch of different genres. We just signed a metalcore band. We've done alt country. We've done hip hop. It really just depends on what your band is looking for. If you're in a hard rock band, go look for, a hard rock label. And if that's what you want to do, if you want to be surrounded by people of the same genre, that might be beneficial to you. Especially if you're pitching to sort of the bigger indie labels, it definitely helps sometimes to be on a genre specific label. You definitely want to, if someone's never, if you don't approach labels who've never released something in your genre, I feel like that might be a waste of your time. I said in the last episode, if someone's playing disco, don't send us disco music. We don't put that out. But if you're somewhat in that vein, that's perfect. That being said, I have a big thing I want to say, because this has happened so many times. And people do this all the time with emails, I think. But when you're doing copy paste, I get it. It makes things easier. Make sure you know who you're talking to. I've gotten a lot of emails when someone says like, hey, Fat Records, hey, Asian Man Records, hey, Bad Times Records. But they're emailing me, and they got the email right at the top, because it came to me, but they didn't ever change. So be careful with that, because I can tell you, if you didn't pay that much attention to detail and you said that, I'm just like right into the trash. It's no offense, but just try to get it right. That is a thing though. So be careful who you're writing and how you're writing it, because that's important. Presentation and attention to detail, very important qualities to have when you're pitching to a record label.
Yeah, and while you had mentioned about look for bands and see what labels are they on. Is that a good? Networking is make or break in this business, or honestly any industry. If you don't network, you're never going to move forward or grow. So do you think it's an important thing to find those bands? Like, hey, you know what? Let's say, I really want to be on Punkerton. So I'm going to look for the Boy Detective. I'm going to look for Lot Lizards. I'm going to look for, and try to get on bills with them. If you see them coming through saying, hey, do you need an opener? Do you think that's a good way to get on labels' radar? And also when they want to approach them, like, hey, I've done this with so-and-so and so-and-so, and showing those mutual connections.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Because if I see a band who, because this happens a lot, they're like, oh yeah, we just played a show with a so-and-so band on your label. They had nothing but good things to say about you, stuff like that. That's very helpful. We just recently signed a band that, when they, even in their initial email, they're like, we really love what you're doing. We heard Middle Out's record, and it was great, and and the thing is I signed the band, but I love the band that I signed. They were amazing, and so I give full credit to Middle Out, even though they had never played with them. They were very familiar with their music, and but that's also part of it. But I do want to kind of put sort of a warning on that too, is not every band is going to be happy with their label for one reason or the other. And a lot of times, I guess it could be the label's fault a lot of times. Some labels aren't great. But also there might just be some misunderstanding, or somebody might be having even just having a bad day, right? So I would not I would get an average, right? Like, ask all the bands, like, if you know them, like, hey, what do you think of your label? What's it like to be on this label? Because a lot of times people have different experiences, and it's, for one reason or the other, whether it's the label's fault or whether it's the band's fault or whether if it's, a million different reasons. I would just say don't make that the be all end all. Is one band's opinion that you've been playing some shows with, and because like that's not always a good thing. And I've seen that happen to a bunch of my friends who own labels, who are like, oh man, I was really wanting this band, but they played with this other band who, for whatever reason, they were at odds over something. And when 99% of the other bands are having a great time, and I know that may sound some like record label overlord type stuff, like propaganda, but no, really though, like you at least talk to them if it's something, don't let that like crush your hopes and dreams about a label. But also, like, pay attention to the label itself. Go to their social medias and things like that, because it is helpful. I do like take a lot of bands' opinions. Like the very first band we ever put out on vinyl, the lead singer from Ryan, is a band called Lame Ass Dads. He was the one who pushed Middle Out. He's like, Middle Out had submitted, and I was so busy I kind of wasn't getting around to it. And he's like, hey, check this band out. Trust me, trust me, trust me. And I'm glad I did. I took his word for it. I was on my way to see the Menzinger, so I was like on a 2-hour drive, and I threw that album in, and I was like, oh my God. And, they ended up being sort of the flagship band of last year, and just, they accomplished so much, and the album was so good. And yeah, so if you are friends with the band on a label, ask them. But also don't let that be your one-stop shop. There might be other labels out there, and you do need to explore, right? Like, you really should. You don't want to throw all your eggs in one basket, because it may not be, you need to find a label that's going to fit you best.
Yeah, I got something to say to that, but first, side note, Ryan from Lame Ass Dads, I've known him for a while. Absolute badass guy, totally cool as hell. And you want to know how to do social media, right? Go check out Lame Ass Dads, because they are awesome. They're on point. They're on brand all the time. So shout out to Ryan and Lame Ass Dads. But like you said, though, it's important what you got to research. Anything you want to do and step into, I will say this over and over and over. Put time in research and get your shit together before you take any steps doing anything. Like you said, talk to that band you're playing with, but talk to each band member. You might talk to the singer and be like, oh God, I love the label. We're doing great. And every other member of the band is just in agony over it. Make sure you talk to everybody, and somebody might just be having a bad day. But yeah, like you said, don't get one opinion and let that be the end all of it. Because I guarantee there's people that don't like you either that are going to give. I know there's people that don't like me if you talk to the wrong person. So it's like, yeah, don't let one person's opinion be the end all. Do your research. Because, when it comes to the music industry, that label is going to be huge. That's going to be that's probably one of your bucket list goals. Do it right and make sure you end up on the right one, because you don't want to end up on the wrong label and end up making a bad name for yourself, even if it's not your fault. Let's say you get on a label it's not a real good business. Maybe it isn't run properly. Maybe they don't put the time in they're supposed to. You don't want that to end up looking bad for you either. So put in that time and research, people. Yeah, obviously it takes time, but it's worth it in the long run.
Oh yeah, I mean, especially depending on what kind of contract you'd eventually be signing. I know, like a lot of bands will sign over their masters, and things like that. Well, you want to make sure if that's the approach you take, you want to make sure that those are in good hands. You need to, and ultimately when you do, and I know I'm eventually get to it, but I do want to say, uh, if you before you ever sign anything, have an attorney look over things. Just want to throw that out there. Don't forget to do that.
Yeah, some things cost money, but it's well worth it. Any type of contracts, and especially in this industry, you gotta watch yourself. And just because you might not understand the next step, because you're like, well, anything I get, I'm gonna be happy with because it's more than I was making. Okay, but if you would have had somebody help you negotiate that extra 10% could be a lot in the long run, or it could be just that little amount that's the make or break for you or your band members as well.
Yeah.
Okay, so so what is some mistakes you see bands making when they do submit and they do approach a label?
Well, I as far as the submission process, uh, a lot of bands are very impatient, and nothing annoys me more than when I'm talking with a band. So bands have to understand, bands who are signed to the label have priority over bands who are approaching and aren't signed yet, because I'm under contractual obligations to make sure the bands on the label are taken care of first. Now, it might take a label a long time, a little bit longer than you were hoping to get everything finalized, or to get around to doing this, that, and the other. And it's not that they don't care, it's just that you aren't the priority. You just simply aren't. If you think you are and you deserve to be, I'm sorry, but no. Don't get me wrong. Like, unfortunately, there have been times where I'm like, I'll get, I really want your band. Wait, just let me get, especially busy labels or labels that don't have a huge staff like us. Like, I am behind perpetually every single day. I'm always behind. Lee knows, like it's just I'm swamped every single day. And I had a band reach out the other day. They're like, "Hey, what about that a contract you were going to send over?" And it's like, "I'm getting it. I'm sorry. Like, if you want to use that time to go search other places, cool. And if they hop and jump ship and or don't want to, but if we have a verbal agreement, I'm going to get it to you. But I understand some people are impatient. But once you take that opportunity to start looking, then I'm probably done because I'm not going to put any more effort into it. Like, be patient. And that's the same thing with bands. I mean, I had a band that I don't want to, I'm not going to name drop them, but like we were going to sign, they had some songs and, then suddenly they just put them out and it had only been like a week and a half and they started, and I was like, all right, well, no, like we're not, good luck, but like you already put this out. Like I have nothing to do. I have nothing to offer. And, and so unfortunately, just a lot of bands aren't patient and they think that it's all supposed to happen right now. And, this also ties into a band who's got a brand new record. They just got done in the studio and then they release it all. And this goes into the whole marketing thing too, is they release it all without any marketing 2 weeks after their masters are done. And they have just wasted all that money, all that time, all that stuff. And, a band or like, yeah, anyways, I could go on about that, but
Yeah, well, like you said, that's the thing is, it's a digital landscape now. There is no marketing; it's digital marketing and basically social media marketing. There is no real just marketing anymore. So, I mean, that has changed how everything is. So when it comes, so you need to plan for that when you're in the studio, when you're writing those songs. People need to start thinking like, okay, how am I going to market this when I'm done? If you start thinking about that stuff at the conception of the album, when it comes time to do it, you're already ahead of the game. You know what you need to do, and instead of like, all right, I'm gonna put everything into this, and now I'm done with that. I have to do something completely different from the marketing standpoint. If you work those things together, the marketing can be just as creative and just as fun as the music itself.
I kind of want to actually add to that last part. What I was saying, if you're in a band, let's say you have a full record, you want a record label to put it out. If you want that album out like sooner rather than later, then you probably shouldn't sign with a label. The general rule for a full length is 6 months. So if you want that album out before 6 months, don't approach a label. If somebody hands me masters they've been sitting on for 6 months already, unfortunately they're gonna have to wait like another year, another 6 months, so a year total. People make that mistake. They think as soon as they sign with a label, like that album's going out the door, and no, we have to create a marketing timeline and a release schedule, and we got to get the singles, and we got to do all the other things that even before we even announce the release, like we've got to get brand new band photos. Like I really don't like using a band's photos from before they were on the label. Like I prefer something new, right? We're starting a brand new era of this band's career, and so like be careful and be mindful of that. If you are in a band, like there are certain things that you're going to have to be patient on. And I wanted to kind of add to that. I do apologize, but I feel like that was important.
Yeah, no, and it goes right into like what we were talking about, though. If let's say you're sitting on those masters for 6 months and you're not doing anything with them, you can take that time while you're approaching labels or what is to also start planning out your marketing. I mean, as a label owner, how much would you love it if a band came to you and they're like, I've got these masters, they're incredible, we've been together for 10 years, and I've got the next 6 months of marketing plan for the album release.
Oh yeah, it makes the job exponentially easier. I would say, always be flexible in your plan, because that might not line up with the labels plan too, because like people have to understand too, and I've been, telling bands this, and Lee, like we have a release schedule, and if your album comes in and it might clash with a few other things, I have a standard rule, like no two albums released the same day. I try not to have singles released the same day if possible, and so you might have to adjust, and that's just part of being on a label. Is the label is one who ultimately makes those decisions most of the time. Now, a lot of times, like in my case, I'll ask them, hey, what do you prefer? When would you want to release these? What songs do you think would be the best singles to put out, and different things like that. And you have a lot of say in that. But ultimately, if it clashes, and it means that I would have to divert resources from one band in favor of another, I don't like to do that. I like everyone sort of, treated equally as far as the release. And that's why if we have 5 bands all releasing singles the same day, that makes things a little bit awkward, because we only have a finite amount of marketing resources and things like that. And, so, I'm not going to say what bands, but come November, we've got 3 full lengths coming out, and that's great, but none of them are the same day. So
we were talking about how bands, cool, because most bands don't come to a label unless they've already released stuff themselves, self-produced, self-distributed. How important is it as a label owner when a band's approaching you and submitting to see that they've taken the time and spent their own money to do that DIY, self-production, self-release? They've got 2 or 3, they got 2 EPs and an LP out there. How important is it for you to see, like, okay, yeah, they are consistently putting stuff out?
I mean, I feel like if they've put that much music out, I like to see the success of it and how it did and what they did, what worked for them and what didn't, because, we don't live in a vacuum. And if they did certain things that worked a certain way and it worked well, then I want to piggyback off of that and maybe we continue that. Now, if they were abysmal, I hope that the band would, if those previous releases were, not that great, I would hope that a band would at least embrace some of my ideas and some of our, ideas, and we could collectively work together to kind of get that out. But also, like, I feel like I really like for a band to I will promote a band's releases, whether it was independently released or on a previous label, because that just helps the bands. And I'm like, oh, you might remember this band from this release, and help push it, especially if we haven't put anything out together yet. Like, we need something to use to promote this band that just signed. And, so that's always great. Like, if they have previous stuff, when we're doing social media posts and we're putting reels together, we're using their old music, and I have no problem with that. Even if they were on like another label, like, I'm sure I might be friends with some of those labels that a lot of these bands were on, and I know that they would appreciate it. And, and of course the band, if no one's got anything to listen to, like, from the band from this label, then it just makes sense. So.
Well, yeah, and a little full disclosure, I think a lot of people know, but I'm the social media manager for Punkerton. So this is something we see a lot is, like you said, having those, you got to have something to promote. You want your roster active and have, like you said, being able to have those relationships with some of those other labels. So if you've got bands that are approaching you that have stuff that it's not your release, but that still gives you something to help get this band out there. So that way, when there is time for a release, people be like, oh shit, I remember them from whatever.
Yeah.
All right. So when it comes to, well, actually, you know what? I wasn't even planning to talk about this. So when it comes to getting on a label's radar, a big way to do that is compilations. It's a great way for labels to find new bands, and it's a great way for bands to get their unreleased stuff out there. What are some basic do's and don'ts if, when you're putting out a compilation, you want submissions? What's a good way for a band to know it's going to get seen, it's going to get listened to, and, to give them a better chance?
Well, I know that I've ran into this with some recent compilations. Do what the label asks you to do as far as submissions. I have an email set up just for label submissions. And then I have a Google form for submissions for our compilations. If you send the label submission email, the compilation stuff, I will not listen to it. I will not even touch it, because you didn't follow the instructions. That email for submissions is for bands trying to hop on the label, and we get, again, so many of those. Now, if you fill out the Google form, it comes in I can put it in like a spreadsheet. It's all there right in front of me. I'm not dancing around. But on top of that, if you do submit to a compilation and it says, hey, put a Dropbox or a Google link, please, for the love of God, make it accessible to me. I am not contacting your band if I can't listen to your track to get permission. I understand that you want to be, you don't want that link out into the world. Well, make a separate link. Make a separate place for that track specifically, where I'm literally the only person in the world who can hear it. Like, I don't mean that to be rude, but like, I'm so busy with other things that I can't wait. Our last compilation had over 200 submissions. And when we have to narrow it down quickly, if it's not submitted correctly, that is a quick, all right, they're not going to be on there. Like, and then you cannot be upset if there were specific instructions on how to do it. Like, I'm not trying to be a jerk. I'm really not. It's just, this industry is cutthroat as it is enough that, like, I don't know. I'm going to come across as a grouch on that, but like,
no, because I mean, 100%. It's still a job. It's a job application. If I fill out a job application and don't put my name on it, they're not going to call the number on there to see who they're talking to. It's the same thing, and I think it's a good way to look at it that way. I mean, they're only going to label's only going to contact you one time, and that's to say, yes, you're going to be on the compilation. They're not going to contact you to say, hey, you forgot to do this, and this, in order for me to even look at it, in order to think about you being on a compilation.
Yeah, and like, if somebody made an honest mistake, sometimes, I'll figure it out. but I would say in addition to that, like, with ours, it asks certain questions. No music lingo. If you see a word there that you're not 100% familiar with, go look it up real quick. I did run into that a lot with this last compilation that we're finishing up. Is, it'll ask who your publisher is, and people will put like DistroKid, or ask, who their label is, and they won't put the correct information for their label. And I'm like, man, that's a weird relationship to not know that information. Um, but yeah, like, just know your lingo and know what certain terms mean, and I'll say songwriter information, and they'll put their band name. And, like, no offense, guys, like, that's not what like, your band is not the songwriter. We need government names for each individual that had anything to do, and go look up what it means to be a songwriter and be considered for that. And, that is something you determine within your band. But, um, like, some of that stuff's important in a legal way, because, like, I'll tell you one thing, I would hate to ever get sued for anything that the band on my label did, but I can guarantee you I will never get sued for something that somebody did on a submission for a compilation. Um, we very much have a legal representation when it comes to Punkerton Records, and we know how to make sure that we don't get sued because of the mistakes of others. We're over here trying to not get sued for our own things. So, um, and that's the thing. It's like, that information is critical, and it is important, because there are, and this is something which I don't know if you were going to bring up, but there's a lot of things that bands don't understand about the legal side of the music industry. And I understand that they don't, but you've got to, you've really got to learn a lot of stuff that you may not realize that you have to learn. Um, and again, that's why I say, like, always hire an attorney when you are looking over contracts, and when you are doing, this, that, and the other. Even simple Google searches to kind of find out what you need to do. It can go a long way. And that's whether you're, trying to be on a comp, or whether you're trying to be on a label, or just really with anything. If you're unsure, like, definitely research it. 'Cause, like, lawsuits, especially in the music industry, happen all the time. Here's a story real quick. I know this isn't what you asked, but we got a cease and desist from Disney one time. Um, and early on, there's this rumor or whatever about, you can use like 10 seconds of anything and you won't get sued for it. That is a lie. And one of our bands used a clip from Home Alone movie, and Disney sent a cease and desist because they detected it. And so yeah, like, whatever you hear, it's probably not true. And so yeah, we had to adjust accordingly. And so yeah, it's important. So.
Well, yeah, I mean, I did 2 full episodes with an entertainment lawyer on this show, talking about the ins and outs, and we could have talked for 12 hours. I mean, there's so much that artists need to pay attention to. And like you said, there's Google. I mean, we've all got the access to everything in the world in our hand on our phone. When you go to, whether it's filling out a form for a compilation, or you want to submit to a label, get on your phone, Google, and you're like, hey, what does this mean? Or even, like, ask Google, like, what's the best way to word this? It takes a little extra time, but if you want to come off as professional, that's what you need to do. You need to make sure everything's in order. It's it's make or break when it comes to stuff like that, especially a label like yours. You do things by the book. It's clean, it's tight, it's professional. It's not just some DIY thing thrown together. You really take your time to do things right. And if you're researching a label, find out how they do things. Okay, if I look into Punkerton, I see, hey, this is tight. This is on the up and up. You realize, okay, I got to go do a little more research to make sure I'm getting my stuff in order if I'm going to submit to them.
Yeah, and I want to kind of go back to the compilation thing, more so from the other side. If you're on a label already, and another label has a compilation, ask your label for permission. or if you are legally allowed to do those things, like submit music that came out on another label. See, I ask bands, are you on a label? Because when I'm doing these compilations, because they may be signing something that they're not legally allowed to sign, to be on this compilation. So I contact their label and say, hey, are you okay with this? What legal rights do you have? What legal rights does the band have on these masters? Um, because I don't want beef with another label because a band thought that they own their masters when they did not, in fact, own their masters. And, I tell the bands when they sign on Punkerton, if you want to be on a comp, especially if it's a charitable one, cool. We're going to talk about it first. But you need to come to me because we got to make sure that this is going to work and be okay and do all the legal ramifications. We had a band actually that they were going to be on a comp, and I was like, yeah, that's cool, it's great, and it was sort of a DIY comp, and the stakes weren't huge, but then they contacted the people putting the comp together and were like, we're all our stuff's getting flagged for copyright violation. You're the only band on here that's getting flagged for that. I'm like, yeah, because we do everything right and legal. And I had to sign like a master use license for them, and that's cool. I don't care. I'm good with that. I'm glad that, it sucks that we're the only ones getting flagged, or, our song was the only one getting flagged. But yes, it's kind of funny though, because everybody was like, wait, what? I've never seen one of these before. And I'm like, yeah, well.
Well, that goes to show you. See, to me though, if I wouldn't be looking at it like that's weird. I'd be like, well, that's cool. Why aren't any of the other ones being flagged? Because this is a guy that's doing it the right way on the up and up.
And that isn't to say that the other bands may not have been independent or they had different agreements or whatever. It was funny that we were the only ones, though. Like, I'm not saying, to be clear, I don't know the status of any of those other songs or how that was, so I don't want to make it seem like we're the only ones doing things right. But I would go, okay, so that's supposed to be a thing. Let's find out if these other ones are supposed to, just. But anyway, sorry, I just had to throw that out there.
Oh, that's good. All right. So, another question that is, when it is time to come in to, let's say a band submits and you're like, yeah, I want to have a talk with them about this, and the talks progress to where, yeah, they're going to be being signed. How should artists approach that conversation when it comes to, rights, royalties, contracts, and all of that?
Can you be a little bit more specific in what you mean?
When it comes to stuff like that, should they, because like you said, I mean, there's a lot of legal stuff bands need to think about before they even get into stuff like that, because it is a contract negotiation. Is it better to come in with more of an open mind? Because I know a lot of bands are just, they'll sign their life away because they just want to get on the label and they don't understand the legal side of that, especially when it comes to the rights and stuff like that. Is it better for, especially, let's say, a newer band, a younger band, to come in with a real open mind and try to learn from you? Or should they come in with like, hey, I want this amount of royalties, or I want this and this and this, and not really demands, but have more of a firm idea of what they're looking for?
I used to negotiate a lot more. I used to be open to negotiation a lot more. Now I've got a sort of a boilerplate contract where maybe this and that might be negotiable, but with what Punkerton offers and is able to offer, it's pretty standard across the board now. That being said, I mean, first they need to have an attorney look it over, or somebody who at least knows enough, especially if they have questions. A lot of times bands will not even consult legal, and if they have questions, I'd be more than happy to tell them exactly what something means. But also I say that with, I am not an attorney. I am not giving you legal advice. I'm just telling you a general what this means. Here are resources. I've done that several times where I send them links to, various, music terminology and things like that. But I definitely think it's best to, and I understand attorneys are expensive, but if it, I don't know, $250 to just look over a contract and tell you, hey, what this means, that's better than, this is for other labels, to be clear. I've never ripped anybody off in my entire life because I just don't have it in me to do that. But there are some that do, and yeah, they sign their lives away, and they're, you hear those horrible deals from, in the past for, somebody signed for 7 albums and they never see their masters never see the light of day, and things like that, and they might be enticed by a lot of money up front, or some sort of advance, and they're like, ooh, but they don't think the implications the long term, and that's unfortunate. You know uh I I don't want people to be scared of a label, because there are a lot of bad horror stories, but there are a lot of really good stories where people just love their label and they love the relationship they have. And if you have a question and you want to change something, I'm always open to at least listening to it. But there are a few things that are, they're not really negotiable, because a label does take money to run, and we do invest a lot of money and a lot of time into bands that we believe in, and and sometimes bands don't want to agree to those terms, and that's cool, but best of luck. Like, really, like, I don't, it's not like I hold ill will because they don't want to sign this thing, you know um in fact, I hope they get on somewhere that can meet their needs and meet their wants, absolutely.
Well, and exactly. And another good point I didn't even think of till just now was when bands are out there researching these labels. We said, talk to bands that are on the label. Also, talk to bands that were on the label. Because if you find a band that was on a label and they still got great things to say about the label they were on, that's a really good sign. I mean, obviously you're going to have a lot of sour grapes also, but if you find a label where every artist that has either grown past that smaller label or something like that, but still stays in contact with that indie label and still has nothing but good things to say about it, that's a damn good sign. I mean, like I said, you're always going to have sour grapes, so you got to take everything with a grain of salt, but...
Yeah, and ultimately, like, and I had a hard time. I had to come to grip with this. It's like, I guess the approach I was taking is like I was real friendly with all the bands, and sometimes a little too close, I think. That it was hard to separate the business side of it from the friendship side of it, especially early on. And because ultimately, at the end of the day, I mean, it is a business, but I try not to run it as much as a strict black and white type thing. Um, and but sometimes it happens, and we've had, excuse me, we've had to, bands that we stopped working with that just weren't, I guess, we weren't on the same page as far as expectations, and I wish them good luck, and I hope, I don't think there's anybody who has anything at least awful to say. Maybe neutral, but I definitely try to keep it that way. But also, like, I do try to develop a friendship with these bands, at least a very courteous working relationship for sure.
Well, yeah, exactly, and also people got to remember that bands grow as the longer they're playing together and stuff like that. They may be almost different genres. You see it happen all the time as artists grow and develop more skills, and they start writing better and stuff like that. Artists change, but so do labels too. Everybody grows and changes a little bit. So just because something fits is a great fit once and it grows apart doesn't mean it's a bad relationship. People change, artists change, businesses change, and that's just part of life. And it's something that everyone has to deal with, but it's not necessarily ever a bad thing.
No, no, definitely not. I mean, I've talked to a lot of the bands recently on our label, and the things that we could offer, when we first started working together, are not the same things we can offer now, or we're not. We can offer significantly more. And, like, when it comes time to sign new contracts, those contracts are going to be different. because of our ability to do everything, because just naturally they're probably not going to get the exact same deal that they got on a previous release. And if that's something that, that makes them want to jump ship, then I understand. I totally get it. I can't compromise, the integrity of the business side of it, because of, because like the more you can do, the more it costs to do those things that you can do. And, unfortunately, percentages might have to go up. We were always very over the top artist friendly, and now it's moving in a direction that is more on par with each other. And I understand that some bands, walk away from that, and that's cool. Like it doesn't mean that we're like gonna hate each other. It just means that things are a little bit different. So.
All right. Well, I think we're just about wrapping up on time here. So, do you got any last minute advice for artists when it is time? Like, let's say they've sent that submission in and they got that call back. What's some advice you've got for them when it comes to that approach and that first sit down?
Know who you are as a band. Know who you are. Know what you want from a label. And be ready to say those things. Know, everything that would either be in your EPK or on your social medias about yourself. Be ready to present that. Be ready to present why you feel like you would be a good fit for a label, for that label, and specifically, and not only what you expect from a label, but what you can give back to a label. It is a symbiotic relationship, and I know like my label in particular, we're all in this together. That's sort of our motto, our legacy, our culture here is we're all in this together. It doesn't matter if we're playing, people are playing the same genre or what. Like when we got a new band on, everybody welcomes them to the team, and if one band's promoting a new release, everybody else is sharing it, and everybody is always trying to play with each other. And I mean, we got bands all around the world, and it's nice when someone's going on tour in the Midwest that there's 3 or 4 other bands who can say, hey, yeah, we can get you a show in this date, and so be ready to be a part of a team if that's how your label is set up. If somebody's not a team player, they're not really they're really not going to fit with us, so whatever it is that's going to make you fit on that label that you really want to be a part of, just make sure you can present that. And so that's where I'm at with that.
All right. Well, Brandon, thanks again for coming on and making the time. You're probably the busiest damn person I've ever met, so I really appreciate you taking the time to do a couple episodes with us today.
No, I'm thanks for having me. I appreciate it. I know that the whole thing's been kind of crazy trying to get this down and together. So yeah, no, I appreciate it.
All right. Well, everybody, thanks for tuning in, and we might have to have Brandon back. Like I said, we talk for an hour every day about this shit, so we could do this all the time. So Brandon, again, thanks for coming by. Everybody check out Punkerton Records, and we will catch you later.